Welcome. You are listening to, and hopefully even watching on YouTube, the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz. It's 10/26/20. Our good friend John Rubino is here with us now. We're talking about failed economy and failed cities. Well, John, the long-awaited stimulus just isn't going to happen. The fourth or fifth bill, it looks like Pelosi doesn't want it. And no matter what Republicans do, it's just not going to happen before the election. I'm not sure what the calculus is behind what the logic is behind this. Because, look, I'm against stimulus as a purely Austrian economist and a free market economist, because in the long run, stimulus does way more harm than good, because adding to the debt, all these unintended consequences, fraud, everything else. On the other hand, to send a bunch of people out $1,200, and if that's going to help them, I don't think the damage to the deficit is going to be that substantial. But it looks like no stimulus for you.
Yeah. Well, the stock market has been kind of banking on a big stimulus bill in the short run, because even just continued ease is not good enough for the stock market now. It needs increasing ease over time. It's a drug addict that needs bigger and bigger doses. And the Fed has already promised low interest rates for as far as the eye can see, but that's not good enough. They need actual more money flowing into the financial markets. And the stock market was up on the assumption that even if they didn't get a big stimulus plan now, they would get one right after the election. And that might not be true anymore, because all the blue wave scenarios that were out there that looked like they were at least plausible, where the Democrats just take over everything, and then the minute they get in, they do a $4 trillion stimulus plan. Stock investors were basically happy with that scenario, at least in the short run, because that would send tons of money flowing into big tech stocks. Now, the news scenario of the day is kind of a split government, where, okay, maybe Biden gets elected, but the Republicans hold on to the Senate, and then you get gridlock. And that's the stock market's nightmare scenario, where the Democrat president wants to do this big giant thing where they bail out everybody in sight, and the Republicans are like, no, why should we give you that? Why should we bail out Illinois and California, who have mismanaged their pension systems for the last 30 or 40 years? And we're not going to do it, and so that means the stock market doesn't get its dose, its higher dose. And stocks are tanking today because of that. So all of a sudden, we're back in the part of the game where the stock market freaks out, and that causes the government to cave and come up with a new stimulus plan. So my sense of this is that the game is still ongoing, and that there's a number, a number in terms of how far down the stock market goes, that will even make a divided government come up with a huge stimulus plan. So I don't think the scenario where we get nothing is really plausible, because I think Republicans or Democrats, doesn't matter. They're going to panic if the stock market is down by 27% and still falling, because that's the thing that would set off the Greater Depression. If we have an equities bear market that doesn't seem to have any end to it, that would terrify everybody, and it would lead to a lot of bad debt blowing up, which is what the system can't tolerate. Like, if the junk bond market is huge right now, and it's extremely over leveraged, it will blow up. In the stock market right now, there's a record number of zombie companies, which are companies that have interest costs that are higher than their profits. So they can only survive by constantly borrowing more and more money. Well, in an equities bear market, you take that ability away from them. So you get all the zombies blowing up. So that's the kind of thing that everybody in government is aware of, and that they will not let happen. So I don't think it matters who's in charge in January. I think a big stimulus plan is going to be put in place, And that will temporarily, satisfy the stock market, but it will make our long-term problems much worse, leading to a bigger crash somewhere in the future. Which means, in other words, we can't win. We're in a situation where there's no easy way out of this. So it really doesn't matter who does what in the short run, because the long-term problems are insurmountable. And the sooner we figure that out, the better, I guess. But when we do figure it out, then you've got the Greater Depression. Then you've got the crisis of our lifetimes. And I think that's coming at some point in the not too distant future.
No doubt, you are correct on that score, John. Uh, it's a big game of chicken. And it always reminds me when they get into these pissing matches, the president and Congress and whoever is there. It doesn't really matter. This stuff happens kind of regularly. It reminds me of that movie Rebel Without a Cause, where James Dean, they're playing chicken, two cars heading towards the cliff, and he gets out, but the other guy doesn't get out and goes off the cliff. And that's what they're doing. They're playing a game of chicken where they're not the ones who are going to get killed. Everybody else will. That's really what it comes down to.
Well, see, it is actually easy for these guys to play chicken with the lives of regular Americans, because they're basically rich people. If you're in government for very long, and this is one of the scandals that is really underreported. How can you be in government for a lifetime and end up a multimillionaire? You're making decent money if you're a senator, let's say, but you're not making 1% money. You're not making $100 million net worth kind of money. And that's how a lot of these guys end up. So somehow, some way, they're getting rich while they're in office. And, Nancy Pelosi, Joe Biden, it doesn't matter. They're all extremely rich right now. And so the pain that most people are feeling is only theoretical for these guys. They kind of know that it's happening. They understand what the statistics are, but it doesn't affect them personally or their kids or their immediate circle of friends. So it doesn't seem as bad as it really is. And that allows them to screw around with government policy that might cause a lot of pain for people, but it's not their pain. So they're able to use that. What happens to, say, restaurants out there? 50% of the restaurants in the country are closing, apparently. And the people doing the negotiating right now can use that as a bargaining chip, because even if it doesn't work out, it doesn't hurt them really, does it? And that is it's something that isn't reported in the mainstream press in a way that that angers people the way it ought to, because we should be a lot madder about the way the system has worked out than it has. And I don't know what the solution to that is, because basically everybody in the media class and the political class are doing just fine right now. So they're not suffering.
Yeah, they're not getting laid off or furloughed, right?
Well, and let's just take commercial real estate as an example of what's happening out there. New York City hotel occupancy rates are about 10% right now.
Very low.
Which means no hotel is turning a profit. And to the extent that they have ongoing expenses that they've got to cover somehow, they're going broke. They are running out of money. And obviously the restaurants that are going bust now, they aren't making their payments to their landlords. So commercial real estate is the one aspect of the real estate market that is actually behaving the way it ought to in this situation. In other words, it should be tanking, and it is. And housing is just baffling. It's still baffling to me, that you can have a crisis like this and have the demand for homes going through the roof. I just can't, for the life of me, figure out who's home shopping in this kind of a world. But obviously it's people trying to get out of big cities and into places that they perceive as safer.
Hey, even if you have a mortgage on one place and you're going to move, could be your last hurrah. You can get a mortgage on your new place and then just strategic default on the old place, give it back to them. And the odds are that the place that you're buying is a lot cheaper than the place that you have in a blue city, because their cost of living is extremely high. So you just default out, and that's kind of it. Well, earnings season, not a lot of bright spots, but the miners are probably going to be the one bright spot, huh?
Well, they are going to be reporting. Everybody's reporting their earnings in the next few weeks. And a few categories of companies are going to do okay. Like the stay-at-home stocks are still all right, even though Netflix underperformed in their last earnings report. But basically, that's still a business model that works. If you're catering to people who can't leave their houses, then you've got a lot of captive audience demand there. But one category that is going to do really well is the gold miners because, oil is down. That's one of their big costs. Labor is flat. So that's their other big cost. And the price of what they're selling is way up from last year. It's up $300 or $400 an ounce year over year. And that means that that's all just gravy for them. It's all just extra profit. So these guys are going to be reporting really good year over year comparisons. And that's going to make them interesting for new categories of investors because, the momentum guys don't normally pay, or earnings momentum guys don't normally pay attention to the miners because their earnings are very erratic, but now their earnings are trending up dramatically. So that's a new radar screen for gold miners to show up on. And with all that cash that's coming in, they're raising dividends. That brings them to the attention of a new group of investors who are income investors. That isn't normally a group of people who pay attention to gold miners, but they will too. So this is a really good time operationally for the gold miners. And the question is, will that translate into higher stock prices? And that feeds back into the whole stimulus question again, because gold really likes these big stimulus plans, because it's eventually inflationary. Even if it isn't inflationary in the moment. And that's good for safe haven assets, for inflation hedges, of which gold and silver, kind of fall into. So the gold mining stocks ought to be a beneficiary of new stimulus, but they might be victims of this sense that maybe we won't get stimulus right away and maybe we'll never get it, which is that's unrealistic, but it's a fear that's out there now. So it could be that the gold miners will do something strange. They'll report great results and their stocks will go down for a while. But that shouldn't really deter people because the great results are here as long as gold and silver are at their current prices or higher, which is highly likely. So they're going to be cash flow generators going forward and they'll be raising their dividends. And as soon as market sentiment shifts back, in other words, as soon as it looks like there is a big stimulus plan coming, then a lot of that money should flow back into gold miners. So I think, a correction now is a buying opportunity. And most of them are at worst holds right now. Most are things you should hold on to if you've already got them. So I think, the next few years for gold miners is looking really good operationally. And the political climate, which is going to be just crazy easy, no matter who's in charge. They're going to have to bail out everybody in sight at some point, and that's going to play into the hands of safe haven assets. So, good time for miners, and a really good time for precious metals miners.
And we should mention that there's a mine in Siberia, in Russia, that's billing itself as the biggest in the world, proven reserves of 40 million ounces. Bad infrastructure, because let's face it, it's in Siberia. But because the price of gold has gone up so much, they can make a 10-15% return on their equity there, because they got 40 million ounces. It's a relatively lower grade mine called the Sukhoi Bog Gold Deposit. And hey, it sounds good. And kind of like even these remote mines, no infrastructure and high cost, and you got to bring in the generators, everything else. Energy prices are lower, and all of a sudden, these low grade deposits, because it isn't that low, it's in the middle of nowhere, but like 2.5 grams per ton. But these low grade deposits all of a sudden become very attractive, and they wind up going up even more than the more quality miners because all of a sudden it's like they were trading for nothing, and then the market discovers them and they skyrocket. But I think that's an interesting thing, and we'll have a link in there. You can check out the actual article. So zombie companies, yeah, we see this. They don't get their stimulus. They're dead meat. Hey, we want to know what you think about it. Why don't you send us an email to kl@kerrylutz.com. Let us know, or post your comments to the YouTube channel. So commercial real estate, as we've discussed, tanking in New York. One thing in New York, the hotel rates are down by two-thirds. They were an average of close to $400 a night, and now they're $135 a night average. There's no way that any hotel in New York can make money, and this means foreclosures. This means companies will stop paying taxes, and mortgagee will have to decide whether it's worth paying the real estate taxes on it, because the property might be worth more dead than alive. We're going to have to see that. So, got the Biden laptop, which is real interesting because it's a story that's very important. It exposes brutal corruption. I don't care if you're a lawyer or if you're a dog walker, you can read those emails and understand exactly what's in them and understand the level of corruption that the vice president was selling his office. There's not even a question about it.
Yeah, well, this illustrates how divided the media world is right now. Because, yeah, to you and me, this is a pretty big story, and does illustrate how corrupt the Biden family is and how corrupt the corporate Democrats are in general. So it's a really negative story for the Democrats, but it's only being reported to people who already kind of think that, right? If you could watch CNN or MSNBC all day long and not see a mention of this story. And if you do see a mention, it's, oh, there's more Russian propaganda out there. This fake news story about Biden's laptop is just Vladimir Putin's talking points, and so this has very little effect, I think, on the actual election, because the people who really would benefit from knowing how corrupt the Bidens aren't getting that story. And I think this kind of censorship where social media just blacks out stories like this, which is what they did this time. They just came out and said, yeah, you can't forward a story about Hunter Biden's laptop. And if you keep posting this stuff, we will cancel your account. So that kind of censorship is probably an even bigger story than Biden family corruption, because it shows how we've evolved to have this media elite that is now able to censor stories that don't fit the corporate narrative. In other words, if it doesn't further a certain set of political assumptions, you just can't get a story out now. And that is terrifying, because Twitter and Facebook and Instagram have immense power, and YouTube, they basically control what we see now. And if they've decided that there are certain things we don't get to see, no matter how legitimate those things are, then we're no longer living in a democracy. Because for a democracy to function, and I'm not saying we are functioning that way now, because it's been a while since we did function this way, but you have to have informed voters. You have to have access to all the information for people to be able to make informed decisions. And that's what we don't have right now. If you're an MSNBC or CNN viewer, you get half the story. And if you're a Fox News or a viewer of a lot of other right-wing media, you only get half the story. And this is a really dangerous time, because we're talking past each other now. One group literally has never seen the things that the other group is talking about, and can't believe it's important if they haven't seen it yet. So I think one of the things that we're going to have to address after this election is over, and we're settled in with our new government, whatever it turns out to be, we need to address the power of social media companies to control the flow of information. And one way or another, it has to be addressed. We either have to have antitrust enforcement, where we break up Facebook and Google and Twitter into smaller entities that compete with each other, and in that way maybe have an incentive to allow a free flow of information. Or they have to become like public utilities, where they just don't have the right to control what's on their platforms. I don't know. I'm not sure what the answer for this is, because we're talking about expanding the role of government in the media in these cases, and that's probably going to bring a lot of unintended consequences along with it. But something has to be done, because this is not working, and it's leading us in the direction of a civil war. Which, you know, if we think the civil unrest of this past year was brutal, it could get a lot worse. And a lot of people are primed for it. You know, people are that angry and that unwilling to believe that people who disagree with them are completely human. You know, we really need to pull back from the brink somehow, some way here.
So true. So true what you're saying. Well, I think the story has gotten out because the story became social media censorship. And there are
Mhm.
other channels. But look, if you're like one of 40% of the people, you get your news from either Twitter or Facebook, then the story is lost upon you. But this story blew up so fast and so far, I think most people probably know about it. But I'm going to have to talk to some of my friends on the left and see if they have any idea. If they know about it, they do think it's Russian agitprop and don't think that the story has any validity whatsoever. Like I say, even a 5-year-old should be able to tell that. And yeah, it is very frightening. So yeah,
Kerry, did
yeah,
you see the Washington Post statement this last week, where they
uh,
said that stories about the Hunter Biden laptop should be treated as Russian disinformation, even if it's probably not? The
even if,
Washington
no,
Post said that.
that makes total sense to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, this goes with the post-election violence theme, which I just sent out an article on Financial Survival Network. You can find it there, and that is that hey, get ready for social unrest and more rioting after the elections. Um, Two things. One is New York City put all the police on 12-hour shifts from the week of the election till whenever, and they're on call 24/7. And then in LA, in Beverly Hills, they're shutting down Rodeo Drive on November 3rd at noontime. They've advised all the merchants there to put wood up, protect their windows, and they're actually shutting down, like, you know, the shopping center of Beverly Hills in anticipation of this. So they must know something. And at least maybe this time, John, they'll be better prepared than last time.
Can you imagine being a cop right now? That is the most thankless, most terrifying job in the world, because no matter what you do, it's going to end up being wrong in what's coming, right? At least
Yeah,
that's how it must feel to a policeman right now. So, and probably the only thing that gets us out of civil unrest in this election is a landslide, one way or the other. You know, if it's like a 10-point victory, 10 percentage point win, and we can't argue with the results, then maybe people don't take to the streets. But if this is close, and if it's contested, and if there are questions about, you know, mail-in ballots with valid signatures being counted or not, or whatever, and you know, this is going to leave a lot of people feeling like they got cheated. And since we've already set the precedent where it's fine to go burn down your downtown, that, like you said, is highly possible, if not probable, in the next few months. And that's, you know, it's a scary prospect too. The only upside, or the only good thing about this, is that it's happening in the winter,
yeah,
which makes it a little tougher in, say, in the Northeast to be out all night protesting, because it's gonna, you know, it's gonna be freezing. So
yeah.
hopefully we get a
Pray
lot of
for
snow
cold
in
weather.
November. Yeah.
Pray for cold weather. Lots of snow.
Yeah.
And, yes,
Global cooling.
yeah,
Yeah, save us.
definitely. Where are you when we need you? Well, it's definitely interesting times. We're living through the Chinese curse, and you live in interesting times. And a in the show notes, you'll see the uh, graph of the homes for sale in San Francisco. Really, the average home there, it goes for like well north of $1 million, and we're looking at like 3 times the normal volume, or 4 times going back years. The most it was yeah, it's just pretty amazing. Like it peaks kind of in September, season goes up to November, and then December it goes back down. This one's just going, the line's just going straight up. And I would venture to say that in blue cities around the country, same exact thing has taken place here, especially downtown homes. If you're on the border of the suburbs, you might feel a bit safer. But if you're downtown in these blue cities, the homelessness, everything else, I would hope that this was deliberate act by these mayors and governors, because I'd hate to think that any of our elected officials could be this stupid to allow these things to happen. You know, I'd hate to think that any politician could be this stupid to allow their cities and states to turn into third world backwaters. But it's happening now. Anyways, make sure you go over to John's site, dollarcollapse.com, sign up for his newsletter, sign up for ours at Financial Survival Network. Well, John, when we come back next week, it'll be the day before Election Day. Might just have a better idea of what's going to happen. And some of these trends may be very, very much more pronounced, particularly the civil unrest trend. But let's see what happens then. Anyway, all email us kl@kerrylutz.com. And John, we'll catch up with you next week.
See you, Kerry.